Hey, look, my calendar just popped up a notification. Apparently, we are supposed to be doing an AT Banter episode with... Who are we doing it with, Ryan?
Dave Williams.
Dave Williams.
Sorry, we're not
From Bristol
keeping you up,
Braille.
are we, Rob?
This is the AT Banter Podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
I am Rob Minot, and I am joined by Steve Barclay
G'day.
and Ryan Fleury,
Hey.
who looks rather sleepy and grumpy.
No, no.
I think we're all sleepy and grumpy. It's early.
Yeah, no, we've been actually looking forward to this episode for a while because we've been anxious to talk to the people from Bristol Braille, which is where Mr. Dave Williams is from, who we're talking to today, because they are in the midst of developing. What are they developing, Ryan? Tell the fine folks.
I think it's the first full-page Braille display.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the first, but it's definitely the cheapest by a long shot.
Yeah, I mean that's their big selling point is that they're able to produce these at a lower cost that is going to make them actually affordable. So this could really change the face of things if it works as intended.
Well, Steve will be at CSUN next week, and he'll be able to put his hands on it and take a look at it.
Yep.
Oh, are these guys going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, excellent! Hey, look at that! Look at us planning stuff. This episode the week before CSUN.
Go figure.
What? Did you guys see this article over the weekend about the Liberals not funding the CNIB? What do you call it?
Their library audio production services.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then so that story runs, and then 5 hours later, an update comes down the pipe where they are apparently funding it. What do you think that's about?
Oh, it was all just a big misunderstanding.
No,
Of course. No, I think the outcry from the community was huge, and they did an about face.
Yeah, I believe that's probably what happened.
In just 5 hours, though. I mean,
Oh, it wouldn't take long with social media.
I suppose. So really, I mean, you think the problem is? I think it's pretty clear that they do not want to fund this.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you read the article in Global, who posted it, but they were saying that the $2.1 or $2.3 million for the creation of the audiobooks or the alternative access books is, I think, less than half of what it cost Ottawa to build the ice rink on Parliament Hill. It's like, priorities, right?
Well,
You mean the temporary ice rink?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, wait. So can someone explain what exactly this is that they're funding? Like, what does the CNIB do, and what is this all about?
Well, CNIB no longer operates the audiobook library. That's now CELA. But what CNIB still does do is produce audiobooks. So they have readers. They go in, they read stuff. It gets mastered. They produce the audiobook. They also do the same thing with news magazines, various magazines, I believe. So they're actually the content creator for stuff that ends up going out to the CELA library.
Right.
And probably other libraries around the world, too. So if you don't have people making the content, where does it come from?
Is it just audiobooks that they do, or are they doing like large print and Braille stuff as well?
I'm not entirely clear on that. I don't know that they do Braille production anymore. I believe it's just audio,
Okay.
but I could be wrong on that point.
So would they basically go in and do audiobooks for titles that say don't already have like like the publisher hasn't produced a audiobook for it? Because like a lot of popular.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where, we want to get somebody on to talk about the Marrakesh Treaty as well, right? Where we can start sharing books around the world. Create it once and share it with everybody. It really lower the cost of audio production. And they were saying in that article, I think only 7% of the books in print are available in alternative formats. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Well, and that strikes me as the interesting thing about this is that, $2.5 million a year to be doing that doesn't seem to me to be very much.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think of all the book titles and stuff out there that needs to be put into alternate formats, that's a drop in the bucket.
Well, and I think that's where, Bookshare does a really great job is because that, they scan everything in and you synthesize voices to read the text. So, once all the proofreading is done, it's a lot easier and I think faster to produce an audiobook with text-to-speech than it is a human narration.
Yeah, that's true. I think most people would probably prefer to listen to a recorded human voice versus synthesized. No.
Oh, absolutely.
I definitely do.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, if you're listening to a book for 10, 12 hours, God, can you imagine listening to a synthesized voice for that long? I mean,
Well, and some of the synthesized voices are getting really good, but
Well, sure.
like with AI and stuff now, like it's getting really good.
well, it's certainly getting better, but I mean, I still think that at the end of the day, I mean, you're listening to a human voice, you're just going to retain more. It's going to be a more pleasant experience overall.
And in particular, when you're talking about fiction and you've got multiple characters,
Mm-hmm.
a good voice actor will
For sure.
allow you to distinguish what character is talking at any given time.
And it brings the book alive.
It really does.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm on the road, and the difference between a good and a bad narrator is really huge. You get a book with a bad narrator, and it's like you're just snoozing through the thing. But I'm listening to the Dresden Files right now that are narrated by James Marstairs. He's the actor who played Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, amongst other things. But he's just such a terrific voice talent. He's just so good. It really does bring those books alive.
Yeah, but do you think that this? So to go back to the funding aspect of this, do you guys feel like this is writing on the wall that this is just something that this government does not want to pay for, and they're sort of trying to back out of this, and this whole outrage? I mean, it was a bit of a test, right? I mean, it couldn't have been an accident. You don't just leave something out of your budget by accident, right?
Yeah, I think that
They were testing the waters.
Well,
They were
it's
saying-
interesting,
because
though,
if there had been no pushback, they would have just.
It makes you wonder, though, how serious this government is about alternative formats. If you read the article and the post from Diane Bergeron, who 2 weeks before had asked for the budget to be in an alternative format, and the government's mandated to do it, and they never provided it for her.
That's right.
Is it just that, oops, we forgot? Or is it, we just don't care?
Yeah, I mean, who
know?
knows? I mean,
Yeah.
that's right. I did notice that in the article too, and that's a big enough deal too, because they're mandated to do that. I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's even funded enough to begin with, and now they're trying to step it back even more to not even pay for it. And the one of the subsequent articles that I was reading, was talking about a memo that Global got a hold of that essentially said that the government was really pushing the CNIB to find alternate sources of funding for this program. They do not want to pay for this. And
like there's just little pockets of $2.5 million sitting about. Plus, here's the other thing too. Shouldn't this be the responsibility of the National Library of Canada?
Yes.
Shouldn't it?
Why isn't it just like any other public library?
Yeah, particularly for Canadian content. You know, if we need Canadian content in audiobook, then, you know, whose responsibility should that be? Should it be the National Blindness Agency's job? You know, because alternative format materials, blind users are a minority usage group. The majority usage group is mainstream listeners and people with print disabilities,
Right.
which are much bigger populations.
Right.
So why does this fall to CNIB in the first place?
Yeah. No,
it's,
that's
it's
a great
primarily because nobody else is doing it. You know. So somebody needs to take a leadership role here, and it should be the federal government.
question. Yeah. I agree. Well,
Thank goodness we have Audible.
no, but
Audible. Shout out to Audible.
yeah, but really, I mean, you think about it. I mean, libraries are there for a reason. Libraries are there so people can access, books for free, and that shouldn't matter if you can see or you're visually impaired or anything else. Like, it's supposed to be for everybody, and there's supposed to be formats that everybody can access. That's the whole point of everything. And so, you know, the fact that there is this minority that is shut out of that, that's just not right. And it's certainly not right that they're trying to remove the funding from a program that gives them, you know, at least a chunk of material, right? Like, you know, the $2.5 million a year is not going to allow them to produce audio materials or alternate formats for every single book out there.
No,
it's going to be a small portion. I don't know what that number is, but I would be shocked if it's over 10% of the books available are actually available in alternate formats.
Oh, I'd be surprised if it was even close to that.
Yeah, I think they said it was like 7%.
Yeah, I mean, so there you go. Like,
so it'd be
come
nice
on.
if a book before a book goes to print, if there was actually an audio version that got released at the same time. you know,
Yeah. So,
in a perfect world.
Indeed.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, so hey, what's going on?
well, you know what? What are we doing today? Well, wait, I think we've already kind of hinted what we're doing.
We did, and then I coughed my ass off through it. So,
But yeah, we're going to be talking here in a moment to Dave Williams, who is with Bristol Braille, who are the makers of the Canute, which we talked a little bit about earlier. They're going to be at CSUN next week, and hopefully, probably unveiling a prototype of this multi-line Braille display. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what he can tell us about some of the technology that is supposedly going to make this thing a lot more affordable than most Braille displays out there.
And what is a Canute?
it's when you spell canoe wrong.
Is it supposed to be something?
I don't know.
Oh,
Have to
interesting.
ask.
Yeah, you will.
Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm really good. You can hear me okay then?
Yeah,
She's
I can
good.
hear you good. Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Excellent.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for what time is it over there right now?
It is actually 4 p.m. I hadn't realised that Pacific time went forward early, so we don't actually set our clocks until I think the end of the month.
Oh,
So I think you guys went forward before us. So I was figuring an 8-hour time difference when actually it's 7. So just as well I checked.
These time zones are so complicated.
they are.
I know. And I thought I'd left that all behind. Like when I used to do ACB radio, you know, it was like a constant thing because you have people in the Northern Hemisphere moving their clocks one way and then people in the Southern Hemisphere doing it the other way, you know. And here I was in Blighty, you know. So, yeah, got it in the end.
Awesome. Well, listen, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about, let's jump right to the Canute, because we're kind of fascinated with it. Tell us a little bit about the Canute, how long it's been in development, and what is going to set it apart from other Braille displays that are out there now.
Okay, so hello, I'm Dave Williams. Thanks very much for having me along on the podcast. And let's talk about Canute. And Canute is a new type of Braille device. It's a new class of Braille device. I'm not sure it's entirely accurate to call it a Braille display because it works a little bit differently. We call it a Braille e-reader. So it's about the size of a large laptop. If you think of like a 15-inch, notebook computer, and it's a tabletop device. So you put it on your desk and you have it plugged in, and Canute will show 360 cells of Braille. So that's 9 lines, each with 40 cells. And Canute is designed as a standalone device. So you plug in an SD card with your formatted Braille file on there, and it can be shown in Braille. And the remarkable thing, I think, about Canute is the fact that the formatting is conveyed to the reader. So when you read from a regular Braille display, it's kind of like you're reading from a ruler or a tape measure or something else that's linear, and so you don't really have this sense of space, this the shape of a paragraph, for example, and we'll talk about some of the examples of where multi-line Braille is important. So that's the real sort of unique selling point of Canute, is that it's a multi-line Braille e-reader that is initially designed to be used standalone. It has been in development for quite a long time. Ed Rogers, who started Bristol Braille Technology back in around, I think, 2012, he'd been working on various Braille projects for a number of years, trying to come up with a new Braille technology, because obviously the current Braille displays that we have are all based around the same piezoelectric technology, which is tried and tested and works well and has been around for a very long time. But Ed felt like there hadn't been much in the way of innovation in this space, and that there needed to be something new, something lower cost. And so he started work experimenting with different types of Braille display. And very quickly, he realized that he couldn't do this on his own. He needed blind people to be involved in testing and design. So spun out of Bristol Braille Technology, we have a group we call the Braillists, and this is a community of around 700 people now, all of whom are passionate about the value of Braille. So I hope that answers your questions, and I'm sure we can dig into that in a bit more detail.
Okay, well, why don't we talk about the technology behind the Braille itself? What are you doing differently? What is this new technology?
Okay, so Canute uses, I suppose you might describe it as a kind of an old-fashioned approach, in that we realize that eventually we will have smart materials that can change shape. I don't know if you guys have heard of graphene, which is a smart material, and eventually, we'll have something as thin as an iPad or thinner that will be able to form Braille dots. But that technology is still some way off. So the technology that we have now is the piezoelectric ceramic that is used to make the current line of Braille displays, where each individual pin is actuated. So for a Braille cell, you need 6 or 8 pins to lift up and down, and each of those is actuated individually. And that can increase the number of parts that you need, and it can push the cost up. So the way the Canute works is, if you imagine a 6-dot Braille cell, and you divide that in half, so you think of 3 dots on the left and 3 dots on the right, the dots that you need for each half of that Braille cell are made by rotating a disc in the sort of vertical plane, as it were. So if you think of a disc that is almost, I suppose, octagonal, if you turn that disc, you can present the dots that you need. So rather than actuating an individual pin, the Canute actuates half the cell at a time. So this is why we call it an e-reader rather than a display, because the time it takes to do that is slower than a piezoelectric display. So showing something like a flashing cursor, for example, isn't really practical on Canute. But what you can do is that you can put rows of these discs together, and so it uses what I describe as a kind of rotors and motors approach to presenting the Braille. So it means that you can show 9 lines or more lines even. I think 9 we found was kind of like a sweet spot, because you could take a full page of Braille and you could split it into 3 without making the machine too huge and too heavy. And we felt that 9 lines was enough to really give you the benefit of the multi-line nature of the Braille. So that's how the technology is different. So it's it's using injection molded parts. The whole project, by the way, started out of the whole maker movement. So Canute has been developed in a community workshop. And it is Bristol Braille Technology, the developer of Canute, is actually a community interest company, which means that any money that they make has to be reinvested. There are no, shareholders who are going to be walking away with bonuses or anything like that. So this really is about grassroots Braille technology.
Well, that sounds totally un-American.
Well, you can say that because you're in Canada.
That's right. So was that the trickiest part of like sort of cracking that, like doing the Braille dots a different way? Was that the really hard nut to crack when you were developing it?
Yeah, I think the really hard nut to crack is to get the accuracy right, because as we know, when you read Braille, 1 dot out of place can make all the difference, and particularly when you're working, in a technical subject, maybe math or music. So 1 dot, just 1 dot. So a sighted person can cope if a pixel, goes out. It's annoying, but they can still read, what's on their screen if 1 pixel doesn't work. Whereas, the impact of a dot not being in the right place. So the really tough part, I think, has been getting the accuracy right, getting the tolerances for the movement of the parts to make sure that they're in the right place at the right time. I think that's been the technical challenge, but more sort of socially, just getting people used to the idea that there is a different way of doing things. One of the things that Bristol Braille say is that they want a design that is more like a bicycle, in that it's more locally repairable. We're all aware of Braille companies that have disappeared, and then users are left with equipment that they can't get repaired anywhere. They can't get fixed, or warranties can't be honored, and that sort of thing. And the whole idea of this community interest company is to say, hey, look, we're going to put the software on GitHub so people can get involved in hacking away at that and coming up with new use cases and features and functionality. And then we're also, going to make it easy so that if something happens to your machine, you can go into a community workshop locally, and it's fairly simple to get it repaired. You might need to order like a couple of parts or whatever, but it's not something where you've got to send it back to China to get it fixed.
Does it surprise you that there really hasn't been anybody else that's been sort of thinking outside the box in terms of this? I mean, it seems to me that the industry is still very much, they're very much invested in the traditional Braille technology that's kept things like Braille displays very expensive. Does it surprise you that nobody else is working on something like this?
Well, they are. I mean, the Transforming Braille Group famously was the work of 11 blindness organizations coming together to evaluate around 60 projects to develop a new type of Braille display. So there has been a lot, and there continues to be a lot of activity in this area. I think the thing that we're all aware of is that this area is littered with broken promises, that we keep hearing about, new and innovative Braille products that are just around the corner. and then it sort of goes quiet for a bit, and we don't hear anything. So the thing that really excited me about Canute and Bristol Braille Technology was their willingness to really openly engage with the community. Quite early on in the prototyping cycles, I was able to borrow a unit, have it at home for a few weeks in my dining room, try it out, break it, figure out what worked, what didn't work, and feed that back in a very open way. So the Braillists, the community organization that I mentioned that started off as a sort of a testing group, a focus group, we have a very active forum where we talk about all kinds of things, not just Canute, but often people do talk about the Canute and what's new with that. So you're right about we need more people using Braille. There are issues around Braille literacy. I don't think that's just about the cost of the technology. I mean, the cost of the technology is one piece of it. There is a wider perception that somehow Braille is had its day, and if you ask sighted people, they're not even sure whether blind people still use Braille anymore. That's why it's so important when people like Stevie Wonder get up at the Grammys, as he did a couple of years ago, and read Ed Sheeran's Grammy Award to him in Braille,
right.
or if somebody's seen using Braille in the media. It's so important to show that, because there is a problem there, and we all, those of us who use Braille or who are passionate about Braille, we need to sell Braille to a wider audience and say, hey, this is why we still need it. This is why it's still important, because it's the difference between reading for yourself or being read to. It's the difference between you reading your own kid's bedtime story or having an actor do that for you on an audio book. It's the difference between being able to read your own notes. I mean, I found it very distracting. Just then, I had a voice in my ear, and I found that very distracting to keep talking while I've got other things talking at me. The joke I often make is, if I'm not reading Braille on a train, I'm likely to miss the sandwich trolley as it goes trundling by. Because if I've got my headphones in, I've no idea what's going on around me. And you can, of course, get bone conduction headphones, and that maybe works for some people. But we know that this link exists between Braille literacy and the employability and the success and independence of blind people. And so for me, I think we need to have more and different types of Braille equipment. The existing products that we're all familiar with are great, and they represent one model for producing Braille products. But why can't other models work? There are all kinds of Kickstarter and crowdfunded campaigns for technology products, that are not Braille, and in the mainstream as well, that are kind of more socially driven, because there's a need there to solve a particular problem. And Bristol Braille started out wanting to solve the price problem, but then they very quickly realized that there's also this multi-line problem as well, that we haven't got any multi-line Braille displays out there. So how do you show a table? How do you show music that's like multi-part harmony? Something like a numbers, like a Sudoku. All of these things just make much less sense on a single line Braille display, and we end up falling back to paper, which is fine. But it's 2018, isn't it? And we've got to.
So can you describe the buttons that are on the Canute and also the formats that are supported?
Yeah, absolutely. So right out of the box, I would just want to say that the focus has been on making the Braille display. So you're not going to find web browsers and emails and all that kind of stuff. It is designed as a Braille reader. So you plug in an SD card containing either a Braille formatted file or a PEF, a PF, which is a portable embosser formatted file. So that's less well known. BRF is the main format I expect people will use. And then down the line, as I say, the software is open. So I would hope that more formats can be added as we go along. The unit itself is about 360 millimeters across, so about 36 centimeters across. You guys work in centimeters, yeah?
Yes.
About half the time.
Okay. Yeah, by around 18 from front to back. and about 40 millimeters, thick. So like a large, sort of a, I'd say, I think a 15-inch laptop is a good comparison. And then on the top face of the Canute, you have your 9 lines of Braille, and then next to each line there is a button. And that is a selection button. So if you're in a menu, for example, and you have a list of items, then you can press the button that corresponds to that menu item. So you might be in the library, for example, where it lists all the books that are on your SD card, and then you press one of the buttons to select the title that you wish to open. And when you do that, the Canute returns you to your previous reading position. It automatically remembers your place. And then below the Braille line, there are 3 kind of large buttons. So there's a central button, which is kind of like an OK, and then you've got a large button to pan forward and a large button to pan back. And when you pan forward, a new page will load. And as the page loads, it shows the first line, and then additional lines are at. So you start reading the first line as the other lines are populated. So I would say it takes probably half a second for a line of Braille to be shown. So the first line is shown, and you start reading that. And by the time you've read the first line, the second line is there, and then you continue reading down. And then there's one additional button on the top face, which is a help button. So from anywhere in the Canute, whether you're reading a book, whether you're in the library, or whether you're in the sort of system menu, you can press the help button, and it will give you context sensitive help about your current position. And then the only other controls really to speak of is just on the back. There's an on-off switch.
So what's the software that runs it? It's open source? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So inside the Canute, we've got a fairly sort of low power, low cost computer in the Raspberry Pi. Are you guys familiar with
Yep.
Raspberry Pi? Yeah. So the software that is running underneath is kind of Linux based, but to be honest, the user doesn't really see any of that. You just get a list of books, or a list of bookmarks, or there are some shutdown and basic sort of system type menu items. So you don't really see the operating system. You're not really interacting with that. Now, obviously, the operating system is interesting for a developer who perhaps wants to add functionality. Maybe, maybe you wanted to develop a calendar app, for example, because obviously you've got multiple lines of Braille, so you could show a whole month of a calendar. You could go on to GitHub, and you could find Canute on there, and I can send the link so we can put that in the show notes.
Sure.
And then people can get involved in developing the software if they want to.
Now, and then I'm assuming that especially given the community aspect of the development. I mean, obviously that was an intentional decision on Bristol Braille's part to make that open source, right?
Absolutely right. Yeah. Because they know they don't have all the answers to all the possible use cases, and they want people to customize it, to make it their own, but also recognizing that most people aren't software developers, so there needs to be a basic proposition that just works as a Braille e-reader.
Right, but I mean, anything open source, though, it always adds to the power of any given device, because it, the customization options are just open to the community. And, 9 times out of 10, you're always going to find somebody who's going to write something for the device that nobody else has thought of. That's right.
And, you access to the community, and suddenly the number of possibilities are exponentially greater than just a couple of people sitting in a room saying, well, why don't we make you do this? Or
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, where are you guys in the development? Are you guys in the final sort of prototype phase?
Yeah.
Or
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. So The aim is we expect to have a release product in the second half of 2018. As you know, with product development, dates can slip, and
Sure.
so I'm kind of reluctant to name a date. But we are certainly in the final testing phase, which starts at CSUN this year. And we are looking for partners to test and also to discuss distribution with partners as well. So that's where we're at. We are now engaged with a factory, because obviously we're not going to make all of these in a community workshop. So we're now working with a factory who are setting up the production lines for the parts that we need and to do the assembly. And so we've got the first batch of those pretty soon, and we're looking for test partners.
Another question that I just thought of. How much onboard storage does it have? Like, are you able to store books and stuff on the unit, or does it take an SD card or?
Yeah, so you can put in an SD card. I was just having a conversation with somebody about this today. Actually, what is the maximum capacity SD card that it will support? And that question is still with the engineers, but I think we can reasonably expect that you could put a 32 gigabyte SD card in there, and that's a lot of Braille. If you think how small Braille files are, when you take a PDF or a Word document and you turn that into Braille, it's better than zipping it up, isn't it? It's the compression is amazing sometimes, and so the idea is that you put your SD card in. And then any books that are on the SD card are imported to the internal library, which would also be about 32 gigabytes, I would expect. But don't hold me to that. But that's my expectation.
But still, you're right. That is an incredibly amount of files and books that could be stored on one SD card. So.
That's right, and you're not sharing that space. So it's not like on your tablet or your phone where you're sharing that space with other software, with images, with video, with music. This is a book reader. So the only files that you're going to be putting on here are Braille files.
Now, in terms of cost, can you give, and I'm sure none of this is finalized, but can you give us an idea of what is comparable to?
Yeah, so we're hoping that we're expecting that the price is going to be somewhere around the price of an iPad Pro.
Okay.
So about £995 British pounds. But again, that's not completely signed off at this point. But that's where we're kind of aiming. So I guess in US dollars, that at the moment, because with the whole Brexit thing, right, the exchange rate's been crazy the last couple of years. So at the moment, as we record this, the exchange rate, I think it's around 1.4. I want to say, so about $1,400 US. But it really depends on the conversations also that we have with distributors and the demand. But that's the kind of price point for a 360 cell Braille e-reader.
Wow.
So I think very low cost really when you consider you can still spend maybe $10,000 on an 80 cell Braille display.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm busy looking at the exchange rate between Canadian and.
Yeah, you tell me what you got there, because it changes so. We were in New York about 18 months ago, and at that point I was getting like 118 or something to the pound, which was really low for us when it used to be up, 150, 160 back in the day. Yeah,
one pound is $1.78 Canadian right now.
Okay, so you'd be looking at about 1,800 Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
But again, that's an approximate figure. That's not an absolute. I'm not giving you a quote there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still, $1,800 is what you would pay for a 20-cell Braille display typically.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Well, or even a 14-cell Braille display.
Yeah, some of them, yeah, for sure.
Now, are there plans for other designs? Like once the Canute is finished, are there thoughts that you guys might develop sort of some different models of the same technology?
Is there a canoodle on the back burner or something?
Yeah. Well, somebody once told me, you don't talk about next year's model this year.
Fair
But look, the basic premise is that for the first time, we are going to be able to read multi-line Braille, which has all kinds of implications for education and engineering. And even leisure reading, and we should certainly talk about some of that. I think obviously we need to get the product out there, and we need to hear feedback from people about what it is, what works well and what people like. I hope that the software would progress to the point where we would have some onboard translation, so then you can throw maybe a Word document or a PDF or an EPUB or something on there, and it could be translated into Braille without you having to prepare the Braille on your computer, because we've got two kind of flavors of Braille at the moment. We've got what some people call quick and dirty Braille, which is where you basically just take a stream of text and you translate it on the fly into Braille, and that can be largely automated, and you can get tools like Center Braille. I like quite a lot, and with Center Braille you can just right click on an EPUB in Windows and literally choose Center Braille, and it creates a Braille file in the same folder, which you can then put onto your Braille device and go. When you've got multiple lines, the formatting becomes more interesting and more important, because you don't just want a big block of 9 lines of Braille. Like there's not a massive benefit to having 9 lines. I mean, I find if I can start reading the next line while my first hand is still reading the previous line, it helps my reading fluency. So maybe there is, but I think where the Canute really shines is in taking a professionally formatted Braille file, so something that has been produced by a Braille publishing house or by a library, or perhaps it's something that somebody's made in Braille Blaster or Duxbury, where they've really taken the time and the trouble to lay out the text in the same way that a sighted person would expect their print to also be formatted, and you might have a centered heading, and you can feel where the next paragraph starts. When you're reading from a small Braille display, as I do a lot, by the way, you don't really know when you're in the middle of the text how far you've got to go, where the next paragraph starts. If you wanted to skip back up a couple of lines, then get back, it can feel a bit arduous. Whereas you've got multiple lines, you can just keep one hand there and then move the other hand. So I hope that we can get to a point where we can maybe take a file with a table in it, and then process that on the Canute down the road. So I think we would hope for software improvements. Right now, Canute is a tabletop device, and you would set it up in the same way that you would set up a printer or an embosser. You'd find somewhere that you want to keep it and plug it in. Maybe down the road we might have a more portable option. I think that's something that people would like. So there are ideas, but I think we put those ideas to the back and on hold and wait and see what the response is to the original Canute 360.
To sort of go back a little bit and talk about the development of the Canute, can you? Because from what I understand, it's very much community driven. You guys really worked with a blindness community through each stage of the development. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what sort of the real advantages have been by doing that?
Yeah. So I about 4 years ago, when I first heard about Bristol Braille technology, and that they had a prototype of a Braille device, and they were looking for feedback. So I went down to Bristol, which is about an hour and a half on the train from me. I'm in Worcester, And so I went down there, and met the developers, and they were really engaged and really interested in what we sort of blind people wanted to say in terms of feedback. So things like the position and the size of the buttons. Initially, the buttons were quite a long way from the braille cells, and the view was that of the blind users that actually you need to put the buttons quite close to the braille cells. I think the engineers initially thought that the buttons might get pressed inadvertently if they were too close to the braille cells, but we were like, well, no, we're used to that. We're used to having buttons quite close to braille cells. Also, there's some things around hand position. So when you're reading the bottom line of the 9 lines, so you're coming to the end of the current page, we want panning buttons in places where our fingers naturally fall, or in the case of the Canute, where our thumbs are. So the panning buttons moved to the front edge, so that they're in a very natural position. Something else quite early on, I think we talked about, was the requirement for BRF, because BRF is the standard for Braille files. That's the file format that you would get from any Braille translation software, or you would get from a library if you're borrowing a Braille file. So initially, Canute was working with PEF, which is the portable embosser format, and that's a kind of it's not widely known, but that's the format that goes to your embosser when you're making hard copy Braille. And we were, as a community, very adamant that, look, this has to have BRF as well. Something else that we are looking at as a community is, how do we make this work with the other technologies in our lives? How do we make it work with screen readers? Because screen readers obviously have been designed to work with single line Braille displays. So Braille is sent in a very linear way out to your Braille display. There's no concept of up, down, and so on. Right. It's just backwards and forwards through a stream of content. So we need to find a friendly script developer, or even an NVDA add-in writer to maybe try and do something. But actually, it's the core of the screen reader where we need to perhaps have some conversations, because, as I say, the screen readers are designed to deliver information in a very linear way. And we have had some fruitful conversations actually with Google, and in Chrome OS, they have started thinking about multi-line Braille very early on. So I'm not sure exactly where we're at with that right now, but making sure that those kinds of issues are on the radar, I think, has been beneficial. And then every so often, when Bristol Braille have a new prototype that they want to test, then we're invited in, and so, well, why didn't you do that bit? And and that they will explain, and help us understand some of the technical challenges, and we can also describe what the experience is of reading Braille. And then to take it to the sort of the next level, we have helped in facilitating trials of Canute into education. So we have worked with New College Worcester, which is a school for blind and partially sighted kids here in the UK. They've been very long established, 150 years. They have a lot of expertise. And while 96% of students go in, through a mainstream inclusive setting, New College Worcester still exists, and they still teach Braille. So we've had Canute, trialed in that school, and they've given us feedback, which is then fed back into the development process. So that's where working with the blind community at a grassroots level has meant that we can reach out in all kinds of directions. We can look at the minutiae of the sort of the usability of it, but then also, who else does Bristol Braille need to be talking with?
Yeah, and speaking of education, I mean, it really strikes me as this would be a major asset to the education.
I mean, the possibilities for it, in particular for something like math, I think is pretty staggering.
Oh, completely. So you think about something like a simultaneous equation. So this is where you have two equations that are written above each other or below each other, and then you have to try and solve that. Now you can go backwards and forwards on a single line braille display, or you could have it in hard copy. But Canute, potentially you could have files and files of math braille exercises that have already been created. Those files are already created, and we could put those files onto Canute, and you could show things like simultaneous equations, things like Pascal's triangle, which is an infinite series that's used throughout maths, where you have a value and then there are two values on the next line, and then there are more, and it gets wider as it goes down. And you could show that if you've got multiple lines of braille. That doesn't make sense on a single line display. You imagine something like, I don't know, a number square, like a magic square or a Sudoku,
Right.
where you need to do addition in different directions. How about learning about place value, where you're doing like long addition, or long multiplication and things like that. So there are lots of use cases for maths, and also coding. You could see a whole function. If you've got, multiple lines, you can see a whole function in a computer program or in a script, and you could see how a variable, where it is as it goes through, and you could do a dry run of that. So you could use Canute in the education of coding. And another example that we're looking at is music. And if you've got some piano music, you might have the left-hand part and the right-hand part, and you want to see the relationship between those. What's the right hand doing while the left hand's doing this? And if you can show those lines above each other, then
Right.
that's potentially quite powerful. Similarly with a lyric and accompaniment. So you could have a vocal line, and then you might also have the accompaniment, and you can see, okay, this is how these words fit to these notes in this song. So those multi-line applications, I think, at the moment, are still restricted to paper. And you need an embosser, and you need somebody. You need to, and of course, as we know, hard copy doesn't last forever. Wears out.
Right.
We've all had braille books where it's felt like somebody sat on it.
Yeah, that's right.
It just occurred to me that you've created the world's first braille karaoke machine.
Yes, well, it doesn't play audio at the moment, but I will certainly mention that.
Version 2.
Version 2, yeah.
Just say no to karaoke.
Oh, jeez. It's fantastic. No, it's
Don't do it, kids.
very exciting stuff.
No, I'm really pumped to see this at CSUN. I'm going to be down there. I'll definitely be looking for you.
Brilliant. Well, we have a presentation. We're on Wednesday afternoon, I think around 4:00. And we're in the program. I want to say Seaport, but I know I'm going to get that wrong. So do look up the Bristol Braille in the program. And I say we're Wednesday afternoon at 4:00. And if people can't make that time, get in contact. And we're going to be there from Monday evening onwards, right the way through to the following Sunday. So there's plenty of time to catch up. We've already got some meetings in the diary. We're keen to meet people, keen to do demonstrations, collect feedback. More than happy to do that.
So for anybody who might be interested in the Canute, I don't know if you guys are taking pre-orders yet, or if they just want more information, how can they find that, and how can they contact you?
Okay, so you can find out more information about Canute at Bristol Braille Technology, and if you put that into any search engine, you will find more about the Canute, and you'll find our website. But if you would like to contact me directly, if you're coming to CSUN and you would like a demonstration in person, then just drop me a line, dave@braillists.org. And Braillists is BRAILLISTS.org.
And we'll, of course, we'll include a link to Bristol Braille and the Canute product page in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dave, thanks so much for taking some time out and chatting with us. We're excited. This sounds like it's going to be a real leap forward in terms of getting some more Braille devices out there that can really have a real positive impact on Braille literacy. So it's very exciting.
Well, I hope so, and I want the blind kids of the future to have all the same opportunities that I had in terms of Braille, and I think Canute has a role to play, and it's exciting to be having conversations about multi-line Braille and about things that we can do with that. So yeah, we just want people to if you are at CSUN, come along. If you're not, drop us a line anyway. We want to talk to Canadians about how we bring Canute to Canada as well. So do get in touch.
Sounds good. All right. Perfect, Dave.
Okay, we can't let you go yet, though, because there is one burning question.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned that you're from Worcester.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Worcester produces that very famous sauce.
That's right.
What is the correct way of saying the name of that sauce?
It is Worcestershire sauce.
I still can't pronounce it right. Worcestershire.
So nobody in Worcester says Worcestershire. Now, if you live in the States, you probably would say Worcestershire. But it's Worcester or Worcestershire sauce.
Worcestershire sauce.
Okay, you have it there.
Perfect.
It's an 18 Banter
and it's great on cheese on toast.
Really? Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, just try that.
All right, Dave. Thanks so much for talking to us, and Steve, we'll see you at CSUN.
I look forward to it, Steve.
Alrighty.
All right, take
All
care,
right,
Dave.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I can't say that either. Worcestershire.
Worcestershire.
Worcestershire sauce.
Worcestershire. Yeah,
Worcestershire
forget
sauce.
it. Forget it. I can't even say Google. No, I'm not going to be able to navigate that. Can you imagine they had to say that? Okay, Worcestershire. Worcestershire.
Worcestershire.
Wow, that's super exciting. Are you jazzed?
I know. I am, because I finally know how to pronounce the name of that
No,
sauce.
not about that. About the Canute.
About the Canute. Oh, yeah. The Canute's pretty cool, too.
Well, I think, like Steve said, for education, once the math support gets included in that device, it'll be the only device that is multi-line that will actually allow you to see how an equation is laid out on a page.
Yeah, but not only that, it's the price point is the real major difference. I mean, you have a device that's a multi-line device that can, a 32 gig SD card can hold what? I don't know.
It's thousands of pages of Braille.
Yeah, I mean, hundreds of books on it. You could have a kid that, all his textbooks and everything are all right there on the device.
Potentially.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Yep. Yeah, for academic Braille readers, this is going to be just phenomenal.
Which is what's really important right now. I mean, Braille literacy, it's a hot topic right now. And
well, it is. And I mean, here in British Columbia, our biggest problem is having teachers who can teach it, and having them have enough time to teach it. Because none of the school districts want to have full-time teachers. They're all being given these part-time contracts. So, you might have a 0.4, they're basically, 40% of a work week in a district. And, depending on how many students they have to deal with, that's not a lot of time. And the education system really doesn't recognize the value of having those teachers spending the time necessary to really build literacy skills. So it's there's systemic problems there to begin with, and then the technology is expensive.
Yes.
So this can at least deal with the technology side of things while providing a very robust reading solution and potentially more.
yeah, and man, I love stuff that's open source. I love me some open source stuff because it really adds. I feel like it adds to the life of the unit because you're going to get some 16-year-old in a basement somewhere that's going to write a killer app for the device that will push it to do something different that the developers didn't even think of, guaranteed.
Yeah, well, Ryan's immediately going to go out and try and fund somebody to do an interface for the described video in Pornhub, right?
Yeah, well, multi-line, you could actually have it, print out a Playboy, right? Get the shape. Oh, boy. Well, you'll have to keep us posted then. You'll have to give us a full report when you get back from CSUN the week after next.
Absolutely.
Exciting stuff.
Indeed.
Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
Well, they can find us now on TuneIn and Spotify.
Ooh.
Or they can find us online at www.atbanter.com.
They can also drop us a line if they would they can also drop us a line if they like. atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
And you should also be out there looking for us on the Facebooks and the Twitters, because we're out there.
We are indeed. And if you like the show, make sure you hit the big like button on iTunes, because that always helps us out. What else? Oh, hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Where can people find Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology can be found at www.canastech.com.
Look for a sweet website redesign coming soon.
Really?
Yep. They can also find Rick Chant somewhere. Where can they find Rick Chant, and what does Rick Chant do?
Rick Chant is the proprietor of Chaos Technical Services, where you can get pretty much any assistive technology fixed. And he can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com, and that's chaos, CHAOS, technicalservices.com. If you can't spell technical services, I can't help you.
Dictionary.com.
There you go.
All right.
Odds are you probably can't spell dictionary either.
That's true. Just ask for help.
Yeah, that's right.
Ask
all right.
Google to spell dictionary.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that's going to do it for us. Oh, it's not even 10 o'clock yet.
Yes.
Good for us for getting up early.
Yeah, good for us.
Yay. No more UK guests for a while there, Brian. Stick to our own time zone.
Yeah, why can't you find us a late night talk show host in the UK or something?
Yeah, there you go.
You would have been up working at 9 anyway.
I know, but I had to get up, I had to get on the train. Anyways, all right, that's going to do it for us for this week.
Hold on. Wait.
Oh.
Wait for it. There we go. Now the show's complete.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canastech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com, or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840, or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.